Good Friday morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll just open up the Zoom room here, give everyone a chance to get in, and then we will get started. Okay, I know we're going to get through a couple introductions so we can go ahead in the interest of time. So today we're going to be talking about navigating the holidays, and Bridget and Claritza are going to be leading this discussion. And I'm hoping, Bridget, Claritza, can you just introduce yourselves with as much or as little information as you would like to share about yourself?
Oh, me first while I have a full mouth of coffee. Okay. Hi, I'm Bridget. I'm a counselor at Mettle and a social worker by training, and just really happy to be here with you today.
And I am Claritza, and I too am a counselor at Mettle, and I am a palliative care physician. And I am so excited to be here with my friend Bridget and all of you. Yay.
Wonderful. Okay, so let's get started here. So Clarice and Bridget are going to go through just some basic topics around navigating the holidays. And once they are through those, you have two ways of interacting with them. You can raise your hand and we'll unmute you and you can just chat with them and discuss your question. And if you prefer to not do that, you can type it in and I will read it aloud for you for Clarice and Bridget to answer. And I will say this, if you have a question that comes up during a slide and you really want to discuss it, then we are happy to do that too. There's no hard and fast rules here. So we can make it up as we go along. And important note for these discussions is this is meant to be a safe space to share whatever it is you need to share. We are here for any and all of it. Thanks again for being here.
Yeah, totally. And I'm just going to echo that, we love a conversation. So please, like if something's really speaking to you or you have a specific question, that doesn't need to be saved till the end. We'd love to hear from you. Clarice, I was just thinking, it's actually our 10-year anniversary, like right now, of knowing each other and working together. Isn't that amazing? Or 9 years. I don't know, 9 or 10, but that just feels notable to
So
me.
special.
I know, so happy to be here. Yeah. Okay. So just arriving today. Somehow it's November of 2023. And November of 2023 is a really complicated time to be alive. Holidays are complicated, but it is just a full-on time. And arguably any time in history is, but right now is pretty amped for a lot of us. And that's not what we're here to talk about today, but it would not feel real to not just take a minute and kind of find our breath and find our being here right now. With all that's pulling our attention in many ways in our little worlds and when we look out into the bigger world. It's a lot of sadness and a lot of fear. And so we're here to be together in community and connection, which we know are two of the most important balms for sadness and fear community. So thank you for being with us. Our sort of other invitation for right now is just to take a second and really call to the front of your mind the tenderness that brings you here today. And maybe that's, something happening in your body, something happening in the body of somebody that you love, something is happening in the body of somebody that you don't necessarily love, but you're responsible for. A person that is no longer here, an animal that's no longer here, but what's your flavor of tenderness that brought you to this space with us today? Just take a minute and honor that, acknowledge it, wish it weren't so, whatever is true. But we all have our reasons for being here. And if we bring them into the room, it gets a little juicier and maybe a little realer. So, holidays. Holidays are complicated, period. Any year, no complicating factors in your life, holidays are complicated. They steep us in our histories and often disappointment or hope and expectation or joy and celebration, right? They're rich and they're incredibly different for each and every one of us. And they're incredibly different for each and every one of a person in a family or community or circular unit, which just leads to lots of feelings. And
Yeah.
feelings can be hard.
Absolutely. And I think, obviously we're going to be speaking from our experience and our own cultural backgrounds. And please know that we understand that. And at the same time, there's a lot of commonality across cultures and interpersonal relationships. And I think when I think of this slide and I was thinking about it, one of the things that really comes up a lot as I counsel folks is this idea that holidays are special, or we're told they're special. And so we create the stories in our head about how things should be. And sometimes when you have serious illness or some complicating health issue, we think that all the drama that makes holidays hard is maybe going to go away. And I think it's really important to know that they were complicated before, they're going to be complicated after a serious illness, and that your history doesn't stay outside the door when you go to grandma's house or somebody's home, or people are coming into your home. And so to give yourself a lot of grace for what may bubble up or come up during this time.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
Holidays are just so full of expectation, and we'll talk more about expectations and sort of setting expectations, which Kim has put a question that we'll get to in one second, Kim. But before we think about like expectations as it comes to like boundaries in ourselves, right? We have stories about what a holiday is, what it's supposed to be, what it means now, what's possible, and sometimes that happens and sometimes it doesn't. Right. And I think a lot of times the invitation of illness or the invitation of grief is to try and be as present as possible, to acknowledge the stories, to recognize them, and to also recognize that they're stories. And so what's true now? Then how do I speak to that? And how can I let that be real? But I appreciate what you're saying, Claritza. It's like, yeah, sometimes we think when these hard and sometimes horrible and sometimes feel like we'll never recover things happen in our lives, we also think like, well, maybe that'll make something like the holidays easier.
Right.
Or maybe we'll just be able to put all of our shit aside and just like be with one another. And actually, sometimes what happens is that it's even harder to be together because we're so activated.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kim's asking or sharing, my youngest daughter died on Boxing Day. How do you explain to your family and friends I do not want to acknowledge the holiday and just be and do what I need to do for myself? I think you just said it so beautifully, Kim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also want to say, Kim, my heart's with you. That sounds like a really, really, really hard time. And so thank you for sharing that and being so open. I think when I think of people wanting to make it okay, there's probably some empathy that is maybe misguided for what you need. And so it's maybe helpful to ground yourself in the intent of others trying to like, hey, jazz hands, and hey, Kim, look over here, and distraction and celebration. And the intent is probably one of deep, deep love and attempt at connection.
Mhm.
And I think when you're able to come from that place, whatever you communicate is so much easier to digest for people. Nobody will understand what it's like to lose your baby. And so I think speaking to what you need, knowing that people are coming from a place of love, I think gets it done. And so in whatever way makes the most sense, communicating, speaking to, appreciation, boundaries, and
Mm.
plan feel like a reasonable thing to do. And so I tend to be very solution focused. So I love working with Bridget because she then kind of takes a step back and unpacks it a little bit more. But I could see you thanking people for, oh, thank you for including me. And this is the way that this makes the most sense for me to be in a good place.
Mhm.
And this is how I'm gonna this is how I want to not celebrate. This is how I want to move forward with this.
I have a client whose youngest daughter died also, and something that she talks a lot about is how nobody wants to talk to her about her daughter. And that's something that we know, right? That a lot of us know very intimately, is that, like, I wish I knew your daughter's name, right? We often don't even refer to our people who have died by name. We refer to them as their role, because on some level it makes people so uncomfortable to speak to someone's death or someone being dead that we don't talk about them. But when I read your question, what I wonder and what I think is, like, it's not Boxing Day anymore. It's her day. Or it's a day that you don't want to be kind of about anything, right? But it's not Boxing Day anymore. And maybe that's the way to explain it, which is that your calendar has changed.
Mm-hmm. Her name is Hillary.
Hillary.
And
Yeah.
she was 20. And she also adds, they say, quote, it's been so many years, she would want you to celebrate and be happy. I have a hard time with that. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's it. It's all so much both and, which is like, you can feel, like Claritza was saying, you can feel their want for you. You can feel their love for you. And like, that love is just well-meaning, but not hitting the mark, because there's no amount of years that will pass that will make it necessarily okay. And we don't actually know what she would want.
Yeah.
Right? There's like things we say. There's a lot of things we say. And in the hopes to, like, make people feel better and push the suffering aside. And I guess what I just want you to really hear from us is that, like, it's okay if you never want to celebrate Boxing Day again.
100%.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's not disrespectful of her memory. It's not doing what she wants. It's taking care of yourself.
Yeah.
You get to do that. And it's hard when your people around you don't understand. And you're not alone. There's a lot of people, probably a lot of other people in this room here today, who have folks who they love and they know love them, who just don't get what it is that they need at this time.
And I think when you have those moments of, conversation with somebody you're comfortable with, you can acknowledge the intent, as I mentioned. But I think it's okay to say, the way that you can show up for me, I know that you want to show up for me. The way that you can show up for me is this way. One of the things that I was working with a Mettle client recently was shifting the focus from the request to, thank you so much, this is what I need you to do for me. And it worked. Of course, this is a one case thing, but I so appreciate that you're asking me to be included, and I appreciate it. And I need you to show up with me in this way, which means giving me space. And the person was slightly shocked. I asked for clarification, and then just talking through it was really helpful, and they're like, oh, I get it. And so of course this is a an anecdote, but give yourself permission to say, you know, not today. And it's not for me. And Norma wrote, holidays are okay some years and heavy or even annoying some other years. And so know that like that's gonna ebb and flow. Grief is funny, it can creep up at the toughest,
It's
weirdest,
sneaky, right?
hardest.
I think that's a podcast. Grief is a sneaky something, maybe.
Yes.
It's surprising. It's disarming. It changes the ground. And it can just be so hard to bring other people along with you into that when they have some degree of being removed. And so they're not affected in the same way, but it's just so unpredictable.
Sarah writes, I dread holidays because of expectations. I am very challenged physically this year, and I would like to be relieved of expectations. Oh, this is very timely, Sarah. Thank you so much for the comment. What's the best way to ask for this? Especially with people who have long-standing expectations. Thank you so much for sharing that, Sarah. You can
Let's
share the next slide.
Yeah, Sonia, what is the next thing? Yeah, great. Seems right.
Yeah.
Dread, real.
Mm-hmm.
Sadness, real. Frustration and anger, real. Like, why don't other people see that this is hard and cut me some slack and not make me ask for what I need? Or to Christine's comment, like, I don't even know what I need, right? So that creates a pressure. It's like, oh, holidays are coming. I don't really know what I need. People are going to ask me like, oh, could anybody just like, I don't know, either just give me some space or anticipate my needs more, right? It's just a mush pot of any and all feelings. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it feels easier, right? It's just a lot of uncertainty.
I think
I
that
think, yeah, please go.
I think the key thing to communicate is that there is no right way of doing this, right? There is no right way of interacting with your family. There's no right way to feel your grief, your emotions about a holiday. And there is no, as we talked before, with Norma's comment, it can all change. And so I think we're going to talk about expectation setting, and Sarah's coming a little bit more directly, but like setting expectations about feelings for yourself and giving yourself the grace that like, it's all, being present. It means that it's, what's happening right now may not be the same tomorrow, and plans change. And I think, so much of, and I think we talked about this a little bit last year, but like self-compassion, give yourself a break, and I know, that's often hard to do because you're holding so many other, feelings, probably based on the expectations that have been set, by you, by others, by society. You got to give yourself some grace as you navigate all of this.
And I think it's important to recognize, like with what Sarah Ann is bringing, like it's really vulnerable to say, I can't do it. I wish I could. I know I did last year. I can't do it. Right? Like it brings tears to my eyes, just like imagining saying it. It's so vulnerable. And when you already feel vulnerable because so much has changed in your life and your body is a different body than it was, it's like a whole next thing to look at this group of people, whoever they may be, family, chosen family, friends, and have to say, I can't.
Yeah.
And just be with that, right? Like, it's actually not much more complicated than that, but emotionally, it's so vulnerable. And so it feels like maybe the conversation should be trickier, but I can't, I think, is the essence of what you're needing to say to them. And you can tell us, please, in the chat or by voice, like if it's not really can't, it's want, but things are different.
Kim, there's so much wisdom in what you're doing already. And I'll read it out loud. What I have done in the previous years when asked to come to a party is that I will let you know 5 minutes before, as that is the best that I can do. You do not know what you will be feeling at the moment, like when you pull up just outside of somebody's house. And I think that is really wise and brilliant, and it makes a lot of sense, right? You can't make yourself do things that aren't gonna feel right in your body, that are gonna make you uncomfortable, right?
You can. And the reality is most people do at holidays. I think like the thing that's kind of coming to my mind as like you're all sharing like just such beautiful reflections is like, this is a time where people do a lot of stuff out of obligation. And what if the invitation for all of us was like, come if you want to come.
Yeah.
If you get to the driveway and you feel a pit of dread in your belly, go home. Like the invitation is to be as you are and to care for yourself as you need to care. And I'm going to care for you by saying that that's the invitation. And I'm going to offer that to myself too. Right. And so maybe you have to be the one in your circle to say, come if you want to. The door's open, and go home if you need to, and come for 5 minutes and feel awkward and then go home or go into my room. Right. But the invitation could be more like, you have a choice. We have a choice about where we go and where we put our bodies and how we show up in this time of year. And that's not the predominant message. The predominant message is you go and you do the things that everybody's doing, and it's obligation and it's expectation. But like, that doesn't have to be our narrative. Come if you want to come. Don't if you don't want to come. It's not about me. That's about you.
And it's not a but, right? It's like, I can't, or like an and. It's a but. I usually like and statements, but this is a but. It's like, the idea that you wouldn't have me in, that I wouldn't want to be in your home is not a you problem. It's a me need. And so it doesn't mean that I don't love you or I'm not grateful, right? And so if we can first believe it ourselves that this is a me need right now, and it's not a reflection of my relationship with that person who's invited me, who's asked me to come, who bought a plane ticket, but rather I need this for myself, then the guilt and pressure kind of gets lifted a little bit. And maybe sometimes if it feels right, and I would even challenge you, because it sounds like relationships are important to a lot of people that have commented, is saying, and I love you, but it's not it's not a reflection of how much I care about this. This is a me need right now. And I think if we can just give ourselves a break, to talking about self-compassion again, we can, it's just easier to navigate. And there's so many great comments. Self-care is go ahead.
I just, yeah, there are so many great comments.
Yeah.
Next year, this should be a slideless, like just conversation hour with people's faces.
Yeah.
But
I was going to say there's one, sorry guys to interrupt
yeah.
you.
No, please.
One, after you've gotten the courage to say, I can't, how do you respond to their response asking why?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. And I think, the options there are like, it's too hard for my body. What I need is quiet this year. What I need is time on my own, or time with my pets, or time with my spouse. So, right, you can kind of go at it from like what you need. I can't come because what I need is X, or I can't come because I have a limitation and I'm going to share that limitation with you. Right. I think what can be exhausting part is, depending on the person you're telling, like they'll keep going, but they'll be like, but why? But I'll help. But you'll feel better. What Ashley's saying, you'll feel better surrounded by loved ones. It's like, it's a lot of energy to keep saying like, not this year.
Yeah.
Not this year. And Kim's beautiful comment, which like, this can be true anyone, but for anyone, regardless of gender or gender identity. But as women, we are socialized to not say no.
Yeah.
Feel very bad. if we say no, if we can't figure, it's like, twist yourself up into a pretzel 17 different directions to not say no to people, to make sure that everybody else is okay, to make sure that everybody else's feathers aren't, ruffled in some way. And when we're grieving, whatever it is that we're grieving, our ability, it gets harder to do that.
Yeah.
That's actually maybe a beautiful thing, right? Be a beautiful invitation or opportunity to be like, I don't really want to do that. I didn't want to do that before. Why have I done this for 37 years? Like, no, wait. There can be this like, lens of incredible clarity of like, I never wanted to do this and I'm definitely not doing it this year. But it's real work. It's a lifetime work to be able to say like, no, I love you and no. And you get to have your feelings about that, right? Like you get to have your feelings about that, and I'm not responsible for them, right? That's where the continued sort of like interdependent, but not codependent and separate emotional processing happens, which is like, I can't come and you get to be mad.
Yeah.
Your mad is not, or your sad is not going to change whether or not I come. I'll be here with you in that as much as I can. So that's an important, like with the all feelings are okay. We have to be, my toddlers don't like boundaries. We all have an inner toddler, right? When we say no, that's hard. No is hard.
Yeah.
And we have to say it, and everybody gets to have their feelings and we still get to say no. And this is like a hard muscle to build.
Yeah. And where you can, getting a buffer person can be helpful sometimes. So September comes around and the family's going to want to do X and you don't know where you're going to be in November. Hey, buffer person, I need you to start socializing what my situation is to someone else. And that can be helpful sometimes to have somebody be the in between. I think there was Kim, so much wisdom. I have said this before. I'm so glad that it feels good for you. That doesn't feel right for me. So I don't want to be a part of that right now. I mean, I think that is perfection.
Yeah.
And another one from Merit, I am committed to my health, and this is what I feel will serve it best. I am working on keeping my boundaries. These are fantastic. And Susie says, I finally have the ability to be with one of my children, no longer a caregiver, and each of them are having boundaries and don't want to plan anything. I feel like I have no family. Oh, goodness.
Yeah, right. This stuff goes both ways.
Yeah.
And Susie, I'm so grateful that you're bringing this, like you're making present the other side of the no, or the other side of the I don't know, or I'm not going to make plans, right? Which is that it can be really painful, because this is a time where we're together.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
No, come to our house. You guys are so sweet.
And I think that's an invitation from Merit, I think, to think about, maybe possibly just to put it out there, to think about how do we create community, right? We have this pressure. It's like, November, December, April, Easterish time, and July 4th, like there is this sort of very American way of like the holidays and this, like pressure to save it all up for the one time a year, and it's special. And I love the holidays, so I don't mean to downplay that kind of historical heaviness and wonderfulness of the holidays, but how do we create community outside of that? How do we create connection with our loved ones outside of that? Being the receiving person. So if I am a family member of someone who may not feel ready to do the whole holiday thing, how do I show up for you? And so that is the instead of why, all of us as caregivers, family members, what if we all said, so how can I show up for you? Because this isn't about me only, it's about that bi-directional stuff, right? The relationship. And so how do I show up for you? What would make the holiday easier, you know?
Mhm.
But yeah.
I think, Susie, I'm just really sitting with your sharing, and the holidays have a really potent capacity to magnify our grief also, right? So you're no longer a caregiver, which I imagine means somebody died, right? So there's that grief. And now you look around and there's like not really anywhere to go, which just like magnifies that sense of loneliness or isolation. Your husband died in June. Yeah. And like, oh, there's nothing we can say to make that better, or probably any strategy, around it, but just to acknowledge and recognize that like the holidays can make baseline pain more painful. And it's in spaces like this where we get to come to be together and have some community and have some connection and other people that like really get it. Yeah. So we got a few folks here where this is like a first set of holidays, and that has its own particular flavor, right? Of like really disorienting.
Yeah.
I knew how to do this. I did this with this person for 35 years. And now that's not happening. And, some people the first year just take the holidays off altogether, right? Maybe they figure out a new ritual, maybe they don't. But it's okay to be like, I don't know how to do this, and there isn't a clear place to go. And so I'm not gonna try. I'm just gonna let the time pass.
Yeah.
Pay attention to what's going on for me, not like evacuate my body, but there is something to time passing with firsts.
And Sarah speaks to a similar situation where a conversation allowed for some adjustment of the plan. And I think that in general, communication without expectations can only help you make sense of why the boundaries. It may be sort of their grief response. And so how do you, in your pain, it's so recent for Christine and for Susie as well, like, how do you in your pain give space to others who are sharing in that, and at the same time kind of make sense of it and allow for that to further strengthen the foundation of the relationships of those that remain, right? It's incredibly difficult, but it can be helpful sometimes to kind of just talk through, this is what I need and this is the reason why, and
it can be so hard too. I mean, obviously there's lots of types of moms out there, but if our kids are like on some new era of individuating and they're like, can't make plans, like, no, mom, or like, duh. I hear that. And like, really don't want to be alone. So can we figure something out? Like what I need, I have this ability to be somewhere. I want to be somewhere. Work with me here. Like, and obviously that's not going to fly in every family, and that's not going to feel comfortable or authentic for every mom. But it's like, sometimes we just get a no and we don't say, but like, okay, but let's what? I'm not going to like sit in this house by myself, you guys.
Yeah.
Come on, let's figure it out. It doesn't have to be on Hanukkah, an actual day of Hanukkah. It doesn't have to be on Christmas Day. It doesn't have to be on the solstice, but like, can we make a plan at some point between November and December? I need that.
Yeah.
But telling our kids what we need can be really hard. It's like, maybe we have never really done that.
Yeah. Because we're socialized not to, like you were mentioning before. We're the ones that are kind of holding everything as parents, and certainly as folks who identify as women, I also want to say it can feel like a little bit of a mixed message, right? We're telling you to put
Yeah.
boundaries up,
Yeah, totally.
but then we're saying that, but
Nobody has to do anything with it that they don't want, but also
Yeah.
kids, like, come on, let's a dinner sometime. Like,
Yeah. Communication, right? Is speaking to I appreciate your boundaries, and it would mean a lot to me if, and so I think putting yourself in the shoes of the family member asking you to their house, right? You're able to say, oh, the intent, I'm coming from this place. Remember that, put yourself in your kid's shoes as somebody who is also putting boundaries up about, like, no Christmas tree this year, or we're not going over to so and so, we're not making that hike that the family does every year. So I want to be clear that it can be confusing, because we want to empower you to feel like you can say no, and also to open the communication with those who are also suffering and maybe having some boundaries that you may not understand. Because I think if you understand the why, then it's so much easier, right? Especially as a parent, because you wanna meet your kids' needs. Okay.
So when we're thinking about expectations, which we've been like sort of weaving our way around and just sort of organically, I mean, I feel like one of the expectations that we're setting, that we can set early, is like uncertainty about how we're going to feel. Right. So like maybe there's clarity on November 3rd that, like, I don't want to participate in anything in the holidays. Or maybe the expectation going into November is like, I don't know how I'm going to feel. Is it okay with you if we really like kind of play things by ear this year? Or I'll let you know when I feel like I can show up. Or it seems to me like our annual cookie making will work this year, but I just have to say that, like, I might bow out. That the expectation could be that you're not sure. Right? And that's one of the things we don't love in this time. People want to know, like, who's coming and when are you coming and how many places do I have to set, and you're definitely coming. And so our response when we're thinking about expectations can kind of continue on that same, like, the same poles of like, oh, I'll just say, no, I can't come. But another expectation you could set is, I don't know.
Right.
Can we play with, I don't know?
Yeah.
I also just wonder, like, when it feels authentic and like, not like you're putting it on, like, how can we use humor in this space, right? Like, how can we play with it? Like, we get, even as we've been talking today, like, we can get so like, my body's like kind of started to like, my shoulders are going down. I'm like sitting farther into my chair because this can all feel so heavy. And like, I don't know, is there a way to be like, yeah, grief is such a sneaky effort. Like, I don't know, maybe I'll like show up at your house and then need to leave immediately because I'm like overcome. But like, is there a way to find some playfulness in it, in the places where that might feel safe, just to give yourself a sense of levity, if that's possible, but also to say to other people, like, yeah, it's been years and this grief is still real for me. And I know that that's hard for you. And I can use some humor to diffuse what just can feel so like thick and stuck and like hard to negotiate around, requires kind of like yes or no, or right. Is there a way that we can play a little? And that's just going to be a no in some instances and for some people. And sometimes we need to be reminded that it's okay. Like, jokes are okay and lightness is okay and kind of teasing is okay in this space when we initiate it, to just create a different vibe.
Yeah. And I think, especially for caregivers or someone who is having a tough time with like interacting and having long conversations or being awake during the day, etc., I think really just where possible, just letting people know, grandma or dad or auntie or whoever is going to have different energy levels throughout the day. It's nothing personal. I know you have flown 3,000 miles to be here. And I want you to think about all the possible ways that things may go this visit. I think that can be really helpful, especially for the caregiver who's probably going to be host and caring for their loved one and managing people's emotions. Even if you're trying to set boundaries, that may still happen. Just really giving people a heads up of what that may look like. Kathy wrote, I'm traveling to be with family 2,500 miles this Christmas. My mom died end of May. I'm so sorry, Kathy. Usually when I visit, I spend a lot of time with mom. So now I will have a lot more time to spend with family. I'm very worried that they won't want to visit too much just for their own reasons. I have felt this tension before. It's just so hard to ask, but not to feel like I am imposing. I want to challenge you, Kathy. May I challenge you? I'm like such a duck when it comes to what you're feeling this right now. What if you just did? What if you just asked? You're feeling that tension, you're feeling the distance. If they say no, that wouldn't change, maybe some added negative feelings, but what if it opens up a new legacy from, for the family, right? Like more lines of communication, more opportunities to connect, more honoring your mother, whose name I do not know, but to speak to her awesomeness, to speak to the relationship she had with others.
Yeah, maybe there's a way to say, and maybe you already have, but a way to say something like, this year's going to be so different. And I'd love to know how I can plug in. Because them saying you can't plug in, which maybe they will. But going into that, knowing that is hard, but probably more manageable than feeling sort of like unmoored or untethered when you're there. Right. This is how you get your own expectations clarified ahead of time, which is you can say like, this is going to be such a different trip now that mom isn't here. And it feels really important to me to have plans because I don't want to get there and just kind of be like floating around. Yeah. Can we talk a little bit more about what this time might look like? And if people are like, I'm not into plans, like other family members are for other people in the room, then you can say like, okay, do I still want to go? And if I do, what can I plan for myself, right? Like, how do I want to be in this place that I've traveled to every year for however long? Is there something I've wanted to do that I couldn't do because I was just sitting with mom for the last handful of years, right? But it's a good sort of other side of expectations, which is, let's learn about what our families are possible for our families this year. And that might mean if we ask really direct and explicit questions, it might mean that we get disappointed. But it gives us the opportunity to then take care of ourselves and make some decisions for ourselves because, you don't want to get there and be like, why did I come?
Right. And then that door gets closed. And if maybe this is not the year, we're dealing with our own grief, or like this year's hard or whatever, it doesn't mean the door is closed, right? So much happens in the holidays that everybody's so activated, right? And then relationship doors get closed and you don't want that, right? And so how do we build connection? Connection doesn't always mean that we're going to be at each other's house. Connection may be an acknowledgement of, hey, this is not the right time. You remind us of auntie too much, or you remind me of my sister too much, or, I'm so happy that you got to spend all this time with her, but man, we wanted to spend time with her as well. And then that I need to deal with that. Okay. Let me know when we can
Mhm.
to build, right? I think that that's really important. So much of the holidays is so heavy, making big decisions about what the future looks like in terms of relationships is
Mm.
is
Right.
important not to.
Yeah.
If it's okay, I'm gonna move us to
Yeah.
Yeah.
this one, just because I feel like you're talking about
Yeah,
this
please.
concept.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Right. So like we've gone east or we've gone west or we've gone 2,500 miles away for Christmas or for holidays, not to be Christmas centric, for holidays for a long time. And it's not going to be the way it's been. So what do we do? How do we want to make this space? Maybe we want to go, but we don't really want to like do a lot of holiday stuff, but we want to take there's some walks we want to take, or we want to go to some of the places that mom loved, or we don't want to do any of that because we want to figure out how to reclaim this space as a different space because it's where you grew up. So I think this goes back to like the nut of so much of what we've been talking about, which is like asking ourselves, like, what do we need and what do we want? And sometimes we don't know and we can't know, and that's a space to be in, and that's okay. And other times when we ask the question and we let ourselves sit with it for a little while, it's like, oh yeah, Hillary died 10 years ago, and I realized like I need to make Boxing Day Hillary Day, and that's what this is going to look like for me now. Right. And maybe one day you'll share that with other people and maybe you wouldn't, but
7 years this year.
7 years. Yeah. Yeah. But it's asking, what do I need and what do I want? Acknowledging that many of us would never need or want to be in these circumstances, and still, what do I need and what do I want? And maybe it takes a long time for anything to kind of trickle to the surface of a need or a want, but there's power in just asking the question.
Yeah.
Mom isn't here. What do I need and what do I want this year? Oh, I don't know. That's uncomfortable.
That's a hard one. I
Yeah.
have been conditioned to not think about this, right? I have been conditioned that death, decline, and disability are things that we don't talk about. So
Mhm.
now you're asking me after an event, a death, a change in health, to come up with something, or to do Christmas the same way. I need to regulate into this new, I need to adjust to this new way of being. And so do your loved ones. So does your community. We're all socialized the same way, right?
Mhm.
And so first giving yourself that break, and then we keep going back to this. And I think you spoke to this communicating your needs, communicating the confusion, the grief, the difficulty, and then finding things to build on, right? So as you were speaking, I was like, oh my God, somebody's mom died in May, and another person's parent died in June. And it's such a short period of time to now create some sort of like ritual that may not make
Mhm.
sense at this time. And so we want to say it's when you're ready and when it makes sense. But I think when you realize that it's just that in our society, we're just not socialized to see death, decline, and disability as just part of life, that then you can sort of give yourself more grace, give the people around you more grace. It doesn't mean that you're going to be trampled on and be dragged places or be asked to give a speech at Thanksgiving dinner, but it kind of helps reframe sort of why it's so hard and confusing, and then it gives you time and space to sort of build on it. And there's many ways to create rituals, and I think communicating about what feels right to
I
those.
feel like also, I don't know, Claritza, what you
Yeah.
think, but I feel like I hear the word ritual and I think like sacred, and I imagine like candles and like warmth and connection. And like, what if your ritual is like throwing eggs at a tree or smashing a plate or screaming into a box or like, I don't know, like what if the ritual is not pretty and it's not beautiful? I mean, I still think that's actually very beautiful, but like the invitation here is like, I'm mad.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to do something with the mad. I'm not going to package it up. I'm not going to make it a learning. I'm not going to find a silver lining. I'm just mad. And so for Christmas this year, I'm going to go smash some plates, or I'm going to, write stream of consciousness, like, in the morning, write all of the things I'm feeling and burn them or something, right? That it doesn't have to be like, the classic images of like holiday ritual or even grief ritual. It can really be something that acknowledges the variation of all of the feelings.
Yeah. It's just creating like the allowing for an event, whatever that event is, that acknowledges the grief, the sadness, the person in your relationship with them. And then that can change. So maybe in a few years it becomes, we're not going to throw stuff at the tree. We're going to plant, sunchokes or whatever, we're going to put up a pictures up. Yes, I love that. I love the idea of like, what's the feeling today? And then how do I like manage it, right? And not put it away. And though putting it away is also putting Boxing Day, for example, and saying like, I'm not celebrating it, is ritual, right? Is saying it's coming. This is going to be really hard. And I need to make Boxing Day a regular day because it's this super, super hard day for me.
Yeah. Distraction gets such a bad rep as like a coping mechanism. It's like, oh, we shouldn't be distracted. Like distraction, bad, bad, bad. Distraction is the best. And like choose it and ritualize it. Like there's no Boxing Day. There's no holidays this year. I'm going to distract myself from this because this feels too painful. And I'm going to distract myself in these ways. Like that can be a ritual or ritualized. And there can be some humor in there. Like, I'm choosing distraction this year. Thank you very much. Like, great. Okay. Sometimes we can't just be like this all of the time. We need any space, any break that we can give ourselves. I'm going to watch every episode of Grey's Anatomy this holiday season. That's what I would like to do. Like, whatever. It's all good.
Like that.
On that note, should we go to our last?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you've been hearing this from us throughout. And, I'd love to hear from those of you in the room more by voice or more in the text in just our last few minutes, but like you have our permission, for whatever that's worth, as much as that means anything or nothing. All your feelings are okay. Your wants and your not wants, your not knowing, it's all okay. And guarantee you are not the only one that feels however it is that you feel, even if you can't imagine somebody else feels that way, or it's hard to connect with that. Like you're not alone in this. There's, 32 other people that chose to be here today. And that's just a little tiny, snippet of the world of people that don't know how to go into this season and feel all sorts of ways. How you are right now is okay, even if it doesn't feel okay. And you're not the only one.
Thanks. Thank you too. I'm going to stop sharing here.
Yeah.
And see if we've
just
got
brought so
any questions or anything that's come up. We'd love to hear it, just your experiences or anything that comes up for you.
You also don't have to agree with us if you're like, oh, that's a cute idea, but you don't know my kids.
Asking for what you want is just hard. Yeah.
It's so hard.
Yeah.
It's so hard. Identifying what you want is so hard. My husband regularly is like, what do you need? What do you want? It makes me want to like really catapult him like across the room. Like, I don't know. If I knew, I would tell you. Don't ask me. Like, I don't know. How do you know? It's so hard identifying it and then asking somebody else to meet you in that. Oof. Intimate stuff.
Yeah.
And yes, baby steps.
And wrote, as the years go by, any joy you show people, they grab and think you're okay. And it gets harder.
Yeah, right. Like
Really heavy.
this idea that we have that like this grief is a linear process. It's not a linear process, right? And sometimes we have the painful job of showing other people in our lives that it's a lot more like this.
Yeah.
There's nothing linear. Happy today does not mean not still sad.
And I think being really, especially for those folks with which you're open enough to share your joy, to feel permission
Mhm.
if we're connected and because I know you're here for me, you need to know that today's a super shit day. And that when you're saying, how are you? I am going to be honest and I'm going to show up and not try to be the tough matriarch or the tough friend or the tough partner. I am going to be honest with you and I am going to say, today I was going through the mail and saw his or her name, or I saw a picture of myself walking, and that just annihilated me because I can no longer do that. It's you're doing yourself a service, but you're also doing the other person a service as well. You can be, I think all of us as a community can be change makers and just normalizing that we can't be like this all the time, that that's not normal. And that we are, again, not socialized to acknowledge that grief is like this and that life is unpredictable and can be shit sometimes. Sorry for the trucker talk, but it's harder, but be honest because you're doing them a service and you're being authentic to yourself.
And
There's
just,
there's a note from Kathy. Sorry to interrupt if either of you were going to read
yeah,
that. My sister said we have to make our plans more, quote, realistic. Should I call her and ask her what she means or needs?
Oh,
yeah. I mean, I think that's like what a beautiful final or next to final point, which is like, yeah, let's not assume we understand where other people are coming from, right? Like, okay, more realistic. What does that mean to you? Or what's coming up for you? What are you nervous about? Right? Because that's how we get in the territory of real expectation and being able to actually understand what's in the water. But if she has an ability to describe that, like, great. What is that? Tell me more. I want to get it. Right.
and Kim says grief is lonely and you can be surrounded by people and still feel alone. And hey, how are you doing? I'm feeling today is a tough day and I'm here with you and still a really tough day. And boy, what a great way of just being true to yourself. And at the same time, planting a seed of connection with someone.
I know that this can feel this can feel scary and overwhelming. And we grieve because we love, whether that's because we love the person that's no longer here or we loved our life before our bodies changed or whatever. And I think sometimes when we feel really griefy, we stay in those first layers of the griefy and don't go into I love her so much and connect to that place of love, right? Like hone and brew and let boil the love that's at the very most root place of the grief. Because we feel like that's going to be too overwhelming, right? That like if we do that, we'll kind of be like overtaken. And when we feel really lonely, when we're surrounded by other people and still feel lonely, which is a particular type of lonely, it's a particular type of painful, can we connect to that love that's inside of us right? And maybe that means we cry, or maybe that means other feelings come up. But love's at the root
Yeah.
of that.
And with that, you know, stay open to the possibility that others want to love you even when you think you're at your worst. That's the one thing I would say, like, it's okay that you're a mess. Some people are okay with that, and you know, give yourself that openness while at the same time respecting your boundaries and where you need to be.
Yeah. We are taking you to 11:01. We want to respect your time, but oof, so grateful for just
Thank you guys so much.
everything you brought to us and to each other today. And happy holidays.
Question
We have
mark?
the perfect way to end it.
I love it. That was so perfect. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for sharing in the chat. That was so
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
And we're
Yeah.
here if you need, as you need. Please, if this opens something up, like, you don't have to be in it alone.
Thank you. Thank you, Bridget. Thank you, Claritza. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Happy weekend to all of us. Bye.
Take care. Bye.